Good morning, everybody. Happy Monday. We have an amazing show for everybody today. What do we have, Krystal?
Indeed, we do. Some very, very ominous warning signs coming from Russia about the potential threat of them using tactical nuclear weapons. Frankly, it's kind of terrifying, and I think the media has not taken it seriously, this risk whatsoever. Finally, Washington seems to be like, oh, maybe this is something we should think about. So we have a deep dive into that, into the Ukrainian response, into this administration's response, the very latest on that sabotage of the Nord Stream pipeline. We're going to go into all of that. We've also got a couple of political updates for you. That congressional stock ban that they were looking at last week, I know you're going to be shocked to learn it just didn't come together, Saagar. I know they really wanted to get it done, but they just couldn't get it done. We'll dig into those details. Also, a big move at The Daily Show. Trevor Noah moving on, so we'll break all of that down for you. We've also got Glenn Greenwald on this morning. Hopefully, fingers crossed, we'll be able to get him in to talk about the results of the first round of voting down in Brazil. Before we get to any of that, though, our normal announcements, live show.
Live show.
Chicago.
Let's go ahead and put it up there on the screen. We've been planning something extra special for everybody in Chicago. It's going to be a lot of fun. Go ahead and buy tickets there, and we're going to make sure that it's going to be a great time for everybody, no matter where you're seated. We've got a lot of participation and stuff that you really are going to be able to see live. So I think it will be very special. There's a link down there in the description if you want to go ahead and nab your tickets. We got hundreds of you already have signed up, so we're really excited. Number two.
Let me just say, we're trying things that are a little bit different.
Yes,
this show.
very different.
A lot more audience participation.
Yes.
It's going to be very interactive, so we're super excited. So guys, if you can, grab those tickets before they sell out. We're psyched about that show.
It's going to be an experience, a live experience. Not just a show, an experience. Okay, all right. Number two, we got the discount going on right now. Let's go ahead and put that up there on the screen. Counterpoints Friday. Man, they had a fantastic show on Friday. I loved listening to it.
I'm like a legit fan of that show.
Yeah, it is so good. So they've just been doing such a great job, Ryan and Emily, over there, breaking some interesting news about our former employer. That was interesting to watch on our new channel. So anyway, I think they're doing a great job. If you want to support them and really just our expansion and maybe support the mission of why we started this show, you got a little bit of a taste on why exactly things like that might have been happening with our old one in terms of what happened with Katie Halper. Please, we got a link down in the description. We got the discount going on right now for annual members. 10%. I think this will be the last week that we offer it. So thank you all so much to those who have taken advantage. It means a lot to us.
And putting us aside, I think what happened with Katie Halper being silenced and censored over her critique of Israel just shows you why it's so important to support independent media. Because, you know, even if you've got an outlet that sort of postures like, oh, we're anti-establishment, we're anti-censorship, et cetera, eventually you're going to find a line that you're not allowed to cross. And, you know, that's why it's so important to not be beholden to corporate donors or any sort of corporate overlords. So thank you guys for supporting us and making it possible to do what we do here.
Yeah, that's right. There's no unofficial policies of censorship here. I can guarantee you that.
Yes, indeed.
All right, let's start with the nuclear issue. Now, I think we've been trying to do a job of remain measured, but also cover the seriousness. And I think what you said is correct. I think it's very important when discussing this not to fearmonger. And so let's just start with the very basic facts. Let's put this up there on the screen. Putin giving that speech on Friday with the official annexation of those 4 regions in eastern Ukraine after the sham referendum. Now, beyond the speech itself and the actual referendum, the points that we wanted to zero in on were specifically what Putin was saying both about the West and about opening and continuing the nuclear saber rattling that we have not seen in this world really since the Cuban Missile Crisis. And what he says there specifically is that the last 15 minutes, Krystal, of the speech, the word Ukraine was not mentioned one time. It was all about posturing this as a united Russian struggle against the West. Obviously, that is to his domestic benefit because, you know, of the dramatically unpopular mobilization happening right there. The direct quote was, "The West has said for centuries it is bringing freedom and democracy to the world. Everything is exactly the opposite." This is a long time kind of Putinism. I remember in 2006, Bush was lecturing him about democracy, and he was like, "We do not want the type of democracy that you have given to Iraq." That was really, which, you know, fair point. Really what I've seen from Putin is that 2003 onward, really the invasion of Iraq, and really like becoming himself, it was in 2007, there was this grand speech in the Munich Security Conference where he's basically like, all of you are hypocrites. I want nothing to do with you. It was like the official Russian break with the West. And this is kind of the culmination of that, almost like a 15-year effort of at one point being a semi-friend of the West and really now posing himself as the enemy. And the reason why I think that this speech was so important was not only for the referendum, but for making it clear in Putin's eyes that he views himself at war with the United States and with NATO, even if we may not be in an exchange. Now, the reason why that also matters is that whenever you posture yourself as at war with the West, and then you begin your nuclear saber rattling, you're making it clear that Ukraine is not the audience here. The Washington, Berlin, Paris, these are the audiences, the lawmakers and the policymakers in these regions. And so he brings up the use of nuclear weapons by the United States against Japan, Hiroshima, and Nagasaki, allied bombings of German cities, the Korean and the Vietnam War, kind of saying, look, you guys are the ones who created this scenario. Now we will fulfill that and the breaking of the nuclear taboo.
Yes. And so, I mean, basically he's saying, pointing accurately to messed up things that the U.S. has done throughout history and then saying, effectively, that gives us justification to do the same messed up things. Two wrongs in this instance, he's trying to argue, make a right. I mean, and this is effectively what he's been, the case that he's been making since they ultimately decided to invade Ukraine. And listen, we've covered here extensively, you know, the way that the U.S. in particular, the West in general, and NATO antagonized him, made him feel like, even if it was not true, made him feel like we were sort of at war with him, like we were out to get Russia. And so that all leads to this place. Of course, none of that takes his culpability away with this illegal invasion. But, you know, what a lot of observers were saying is that this was the, you know, he's used some of this rhetoric before, et cetera, but this was the most sort of concentrated anti-U.S. speech that they had seen him give. Yeah. And it was clearly designed to scare the West and hold out the possibility of, hey, y'all drop the bombs first, and we're going to use everything that we need in order to defend our territorial integrity, which now, you know, seems to include these 4 regions that they've just said, oh, that we had these votes. It was free and fair democracy, of course, during a time of war when we don't even know. I mean, this is how insane these referendums were. They can't even say exactly where the borders are. And we'll get to a little bit more of that when we talk about the most recent Ukrainian advances. But now they're saying, okay, this is part of Russia as well. So that creates a very terrifying situation where it's like, okay, well, if you're saying this is part of Russia, obviously there's an act of war there. Are attacks in that area, is that considered an attack on Russia? That's where this gets extraordinarily dicey with regards to nuclear weapons, because ultimately, you know, the last speech we covered last week, he says, okay, this is not a bluff. Well, if you then go and strike inside of those areas that you're saying this is my country and you don't respond, then it kind of takes away your threat and your power, which is what nuclear, you know, what nuclear threats are all about, is scaring people and trying to deter
I'm glad
them.
you said that, because I was going to bring that up, which is that as much as I think it is very important for the West to have clear red lines and policies directed specifically to remove ambiguity from the situation, the same is said of Russia. You can't annex a country, then lose it the next day, or like territory, and then say, yeah, no, but that part's not Russia anymore, but this part is. It's like, well, you can't, like, what? So Russia is wherever the front line is? I mean, sure, you know, in effect, but where does the nuclear threat come from? Now, of course, that ambiguity is probably good for him, but that also leaves a hell of a lot of room up to us. We're like, well, how do we know when to start pushing? And that's exactly kind of the fear, the uncertainty that he wants to instill within us. That doesn't diminish, though, the seriousness of the situation. Let's put this up there on the screen. You know, I think that take away whatever anybody in the West is talking about. Let's take it from the Ukrainians themselves. Just a couple of days ago, they said, the deputy head of Ukrainian intelligence says, quote, the probability of Russia striking Ukraine with a tactical nuclear weapon is very high. He says, quote, they will target places along the front line with lots of personnel and equipment. Now, look, there's a lot of different ways to read that. Number one, maybe he's telling the truth. Number two, maybe you should keep reading, because here's what he says. To stop them, we need more anti-aircraft systems and anti-rocket systems. So obviously he's like, they're going to nuke us. And that's why you guys need to give us everything under the sun in order to stop that. So you got to take all of this with a grain of salt. Putin has got his ambiguity. He got his agenda. He wants us to stop all aid for Ukraine. Ukraine, well, this is my problem with Ukraine is they can't make up their minds. First, Zelensky says Putin will never nuke us. Now his deputy head is like, no, they're going to nuke us. And that's why you got to give us weapons. And I'm like, well, wake up your goddamn mind here, folks, because I'm getting confused over here.
Because initially it was, don't worry, they're not going to nuke us, so you guys should be all in with us.
Yes, that's
you should send us all these weapons. Now it's like, they are going to nuke us, so it's too late to stop them, so you got to send us all these weapons. Like, you know, that's their approach here in this situation. Cable news is ripping us apart, dividing the country, making it impossible to function as a society, and making it impossible to know just what is true and what is false. But the good news is they are failing and they know it.
That is why we're building something new, a new mainstream, a healthier one, something more trustworthy, something that we are going to need in one of the most pivotal times in American history. We are building up here for the midterms, for the upcoming presidential election, but we need your help. So if you can help us out by becoming a premium member today at breakingpoints.com, we're trying to change America for the better and the entire world.
So what are you waiting for, guys? Go to breakingpoints.com and sign up and help us build a new mainstream.